Hello and welcome to episode number 20 of the Curling Legends podcast. My name's Kevin Palmer, and each week through the curling season, I share a conversation with a player or a storyteller from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s, covering curling from the invention of the slide through the adoption of the free guard zone. Don Duguid is on the show today. I should also mention that March is Tripod Month. Hashtag Tripod on Twitter. This is an effort for all of the podcasters, most of whom are much more established than me, trying to promote people out there to try podcasting, because as much as you might be a listener and you might have many podcasts you listen to, still the majority of the population are barely aware of how to spell podcast, much less know what they are. Every day I meet someone who still is unfamiliar with how to listen. So through the month of March, the idea is that if everyone that's listening reaches out to a friend or a family member and mentions a podcast to them, the ones they like to listen to, and helps show them how to listen, we can continue to increase the listenership of podcasts. So again, that's hashtag Tripod on Twitter. Of course, to listen to this show, you can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Downcast, all these Pocket Casts, all these apps that you can get for your phone. As well, you can listen on our website, curlinglegends.ca, and find us on our Facebook page, facebook.com/curlinglegends. Thanks again to Jerry Gertz and Curling Zone for supporting the podcast, and Steve Lobel, who provided the artwork, and Mark Rogman, who provided the music. Don Duguid started curling in 1943, just before the end of the Second World War. At the age of 8, he and his two brothers, his older brother Gerry and younger brother Lorne, would sneak into the CPR rink, where their father helped make ice and maintain the club. From there, a love and fascination with the game began that took Don eventually to the Granite Curling Club, where he then found success as a young man playing with a 70-year-old Howie Wood Jr. And Don will talk a bit about that experience, and then we will go through his development as a player, eventually moving to a skip position in the late 60s, where in 1970 and 71, he would find success with Rod Hunter at third, Jim Pettapiece at second, and Bryan Wood at lead. That team would lose only one game in the 1970 Brier and lose 3 in the crazy Brier in Quebec City in 1971, but they would go undefeated through 2 world championships in 70 and 71. And Don will talk a bit about those experiences, as well as his moving away from the game following that final championship in 1971, and how he got involved in commentating. He'll talk about some of the early days working with Don Chevrier and Don Whitman, and we'll talk about the modern game, where curling's headed, and some of Don's opinions on that as well. It's a great talk, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Here is my conversation with Don Duguid.
You know what? Kevin, I haven't seen him, I'll bet you, in 20 years. I don't know why. He was such a nice guy. Well, he is a nice guy. You know, always we had a million laughs with him.
Everybody loved the Colonel, yeah.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he was always fun. And he was a good curler.
Yeah, and I curled with his son Michael in men's for a couple of years. Well, yeah, because actually when we played with Larry Knowles, Larry and Michael played... Well, actually, Larry and Michael, the year after I played with him in men's, they played with your son Dale for half the year.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Only lasted half the year.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Dale was terrible for that. He had a friend of mine who was a junior champion.
Yeah.
They curled together, and he lasted a year. And I said, Dale, what's going on here? What is it?
Yeah.
Why are you...
You asked him that, and what was his response?
Oh, yeah. His response was, well, you know, if you want to be competitive, you got to have the very best guy playing with. I understand that. You got to give him some time.
Dale wasn't the only guy like that. I mean, he was known a bit for it, but lots of guys were like that, and invariably it rarely found success, right? Usually it is the team that stays together for a while, builds some confidence in each other. I mean, Gushu, I'm actually glad Gushu has finally sort of stuck it out with the same team for a few years, because he was getting bad for that and just swapping out his front end all the time, and I think even Mark got frustrated too.
Yeah, he could be. Can you imagine that Jeff Stoughton had him playing lead?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a different era now, though, right? If you think about it, a lot of the leads out there are qualified to skip, or certainly could, play at an extremely high level.
Sure.
And they have to be that good to compete.
Mind you, 90% of them, that's all they do is curl. They don't have jobs.
Well, you had jobs, right? That was, or what was?
Oh God.
Yeah.
That's why I quit curling, because I owed it to the company, because I had a good job. I was in the furniture 40 years, and they actually wanted me to come down to Toronto and be a salesman. I know I can't do I'm not an Eastern boy. I'll stay home. But they were very good to me.
Yeah. Yeah, you needed to have an understanding employer.
Oh, yeah.
And more so now.
But it helps when your sales stats are way up. If they were down somewhat, they'd say, hey, let's get rid of it.
Then they start to wonder, what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's start right at the beginning. When was your first memory of curling? What was your first time out on the ice, and how'd you get started?
Well, my father was an ice maker at the old CPR Curling on William Avenue, and he was a railway worker, but he'd take time off for running the curling club and being the ice maker, and that was my initiation into the game of curling. He, in those days, they had beer parties, but they closed for a couple hours, and at the curling club there was leagues curling. They wanted to have a beer. They had no license, but my dad used to do a little moonlighting down the base, and so while he was moonlighting, I was out in the ice, cleaning the ice for the next draw every weekend. And the thing about it, we were just 3 doors from the curling club all the time, living on William Avenue. But that changed after a while when we moved about 60 miles away. And he needed help at the curling club on the weekend, because that's when he used to do a little bit of that. And it was my option. I had to get the curling club to clean the ice between draws and pebble and everything else, and clean up after the last draw, come off the ice on the weekend. So that's how I started. When he was down the basement, and I'd be out throwing rocks. I was just 8, 9 years old, 10 years old. I started when I was 8. But then I got to curling on a regular basis. CPR staff to come and curl, and they were always short. So I'd go out and spare, and I was small, and I used to push them down the other end when I was 8 years old, 9 years old, with 2 feet and a half and just fall on my stomach. So I did that for a year. And, natural ice, not matched rocks, nothing. It was, when it was cold, you could hear the ice cracking, so it was a different era for curling, but that's how I started out.
So that's right at the end of so that'd be like 1945 or right around there, right?
Yeah, that's right. About 1945 is right. And that was during the war and everything else. And that's when I started. But actually before that.
Before the war was even over, so 43, because you'd have been, you were born in 35, right?
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that famous slide and the famous tuck slide that you developed, when did that start then? So the first slide was falling flat on your ass. So what was, when did you start to actually evolve that?
It actually started when I was 9 years old. My dad, Ken Watts was hot at that time, and he said, listen, if you're going to throw rocks, you got to learn to throw them from the hack. Well, and he showed me how to push out of the hack. And in those days, you wore shoes with rubbers on. So you took your rubber off and you tried to slide flat-footed. You'd go about 3 feet. And me being small, I really had to push hard, and I worked on it. And finally, my dad said, well, go up on your toe. Get up on your, try that. So I just about broke my neck a few hours of trying that, but it got a little bit better, and I was getting the rock a little bit further down the ice by doing that. So I just kept doing it every chance I got. And I perfected that tuck, putting my one heel on my other thigh and sliding out, and I would slide a little bit further all the time. And depending on the ice condition at that time, sometimes there was frost on the ice. It took all years. Some guys were having trouble getting it down, remind me. But that's how I perfected the tuck.
Did anyone else at that time put their sort of toe in that same position, kind of, like you say, tucking the heel underneath?
Nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody, because the book was out. Ken Watson was he was the guy that introduced the slide, and he would slide out there. And he wouldn't slide much further than past the first tee line or maybe to the top of the house, but that's about all. But I found that a toe slider, you could get a little bit further every time, depending on it. So I stayed with tuck. I didn't like flat-footed because it felt awkward to me. The rock, almost like you're riding a rock. So in tuck, you got to get the rock ahead of you all the time. It worked for me. But it took me, 2 years to get it done, to get it half decent.
So when did the term tuck come about? Do you recall if that was something someone mentioned about your slide, or do you even recall the history of that term?
They used to call them toe sliders before. Then it got transferred to tuck. But toe sliders, there are very few toe sliders in the 45 to 55.
Yeah, I would think so. So you're right around 12 years old, and at this point you've started to perfect this delivery.
For sure.
And you're sliding out about how far?
At 12 years old, at 12 years old, I had it down pat. My dad made me practice a lot. He used to hold the broom for me a lot. He used to flood the ice and everything else and work on it. And if there was spare time, I would throw rocks. And we only lived 3 doors away. So the odd time I'd go, and there'd be my brother and I, the younger brother and I, who was smaller than me, and my older brother. We used to go there, and we'd bend the bars on the side of the curling club, the window where the windows were, sneak in there and turn on one set of lights down at the far end and throw rocks so my dad couldn't see us there. So that was fun time.
Was he going to actually get angry with you if you were out practicing and throwing rocks?
Yeah, he would, because we should be at home studying or doing whatever we're supposed to do.
Oh, okay.
But he would be upset, but it wouldn't last long.
Yeah. Sounds like the attraction of the game started pretty early then, and it did consume
really
you
early.
quite a bit?
Really.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Did it consume you? I mean, did you play other sports? Did you have other activities, or it was really something that became...
Well, the thing in my days, I was a good skater. When I went to school, I was the first one, our team was first to ever win a medal for Principal Sparling School in the West End for speed skating. And I beat a guy that went on to play hockey in the NHL. But also at that time, if you went and tried out for a hockey team at the West End Memorials, which is right near in the West End, very near the curling club, you tried out for the hockey team, and you might say Pee-wees. I don't know what it was called then. I can't remember, but it was Pee-wees. They'd pick 16, 17 guys, and you'd play just shitty hockey. And then those same guys went next step up, next level, and they would pick the same guys that they had before. So I could never make a team, and it just kept on going right up until junior. They kept the same guys playing at West End Memorials, and they just moved along as they got older. They went ahead a couple of divisions, so it was tough to break into the hockey. So I decided to stay with curling.
You did love hockey, though, so there was actually a passion for it as well.
I did, yeah. I loved hockey.
Yeah.
I loved hockey. Played a lot of road hockey, but we had a lot of good hockey players in that area.
Well, how about curlers then? So were you and your brothers an anomaly at that stage, at that age?
Yeah, because it was they were all companies with renting ice and having leagues, whether it was the police or the liquor commission or whatever. Then there was the women's league and everything else. There were very few young women. My mother used to wear a Scottish hat and everything else. The women, but there was no young involved at all. None. We had no junior section. No, none whatsoever. If I wanted to curl, I had to spare for some of the guys on weekends who were in the men's league.
So did that make you feel a little grown up at that stage?
I really enjoyed it, and as I got a little bit older, I thought, well, I can play with these guys. They don't practice, but they didn't practice like I practiced. But I made a lot of shots when I was just a little guy, and it was interesting playing with somebody. And my dad was a fairly good curler.
He was accomplished. Did he have some good runs at the time then in the playdowns and such?
He was a club curler. He wasn't a guy to go into the Manitoba Bonspiel or anything like that, because he had to make the ice and stay around the club all the time. But he in playdowns, he played Billy Walsh and Jimmy Welsh, and those were the names in those days. And Billy Welsh went on to win 2 Canadian championships. So my dad was very competitive with all this, but he never went anywhere because he didn't want to go anywhere.
And so how would you guys practice, you and your brothers? Would you just go and toss rocks back and forth? Would you play games with each other?
Yeah,
what would you do?
We actually, when we were really small, we used to just play to the first house, just ricochet off from the hack and just play a game of point. And I see them doing that now in curling clubs in Winnipeg quite a bit. They're just ricocheting off rocks to see how they react and how they run and everything else. So we used to do that, and then we throw rocks down to the other end. So we spent a lot of time doing it.
So what happened with that club, the CPR club, you said?
CPR.
Yeah. So what?
Yeah. Well, then they changed it to the Victoria Curling Club, and now it's defunct. It's gone.
Okay, yeah.
Just 2 years ago.
And how long was your dad there then with the club?
Well, he passed away when he was 5, so I don't remember the year, but when he was 5, he passed away. He gave up the ice.
He was there at that club
he was there a good 20 years.
Because I always think, when you think of the Duguid name, you associate it with the Granite Club. And so when did
that's right.
When did you first start?
Well, that's what happened. My dad said, look, he knew I had potential. And my brother Gerry, the older brother Gerry, went over to Granite to play in the men's club. And I still at the Victoria, or CPR. And so my dad said, if you want to get to be a good curler, I'm going to take you over to the Granite Curling Club. I'm going to introduce you to Mr. Al Dare and the guys that run that club are on the executive. And you should get into their junior division because they've got quite a few young guys playing. So that's what happened. I went over there at 51, and I started in the junior. I played about the junior section, but not only that. In the junior section, I used to go play the odd game in the men's division. If they were losing, I would sit around and watch them be maybe a guy short. Do you need a spare? And yeah, come on up. So spare.
They had some type of a junior program or something that would allow.
Oh yeah, they had a good junior program. And the other thing too is the Granite had artificial ice. It was the only curling club in Winnipeg that had artificial ice, so you're going to get a couple of longer 2 2 months extra in curling when you go over there.
Yeah, it's true. I guess I never thought of it. A lot of the natural ice facilities couldn't run as long for the season. They probably couldn't open as early or be open as late. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, you never tend to think of that. That makes sense. And so you, at this point, you're practicing, you're playing a lot. Were your brothers as engaged in the sport? Were they as serious as you were at the time?
Yes, they were. Jerry was brother Jerry, who's older than me by about 7 years. He went into the seniors division, and he curled with a couple of different teams. He was a player too. He played with Howie Wood Jr. when they had the very first car bonspiel in Nipawin, Saskatchewan.
Mm-hmm.
They won 4 cars that year.
Oh, the first one? Okay, so he played on that team, and then...
Yeah, he played on that team, yeah.
Mm-hmm. How old was Howard Wood Jr. then, related to you and Jerry?
Well, he would be, I guess he would be 30 years old then, I think. 28, 29, 30 in that area.
And did you meet Senior at all? Did you meet Howard Wood Sr. as well?
Well, what I did, after I played 2 years in junior, then Howard Wood Sr. came to me and said, listen, would you come and play with our team? And I said, sure. So I talked to my brother, my dad, and he said, holy cow, that's something. This is a guy that's won. He was the first Canadian to win 3 Canadian championships. First guy in history that. And he would have won 4, only they called it off because of the war, the Brier or whatever it was called at that time. So I went and curled with him, and he was quite and he was elderly, but he was 70, but he was an unbelievable guy. You tell a guy that the determination, and he hated to lose,
Mm-hmm.
but he knew all the shots, all the tricks in curling and everything else, and he used to tell me, do this, do that, do this. Don't be short when somebody asks you to put it here, put it there. He was a great experience to me, and I curled with him for 3 years. The first year I think was 50. And anyway, we played and we won a lot of games, but didn't go anywhere in the playdowns. In 1954, we got into the playdowns and went to the arena and played. In 55, and we lost to Billy Walsh. Do you remember him?
Mm-hmm.
He was an Canadian champion. He made one of the greatest shots I've ever seen in curling against us, and he went on to win the Canadian championship that year.
What was the shot? Can you describe the shot? What was it?
Well, we had 2 frozen on the button, absolutely frozen, no room on it. And he went down to throw his last rock. He threw it, and he was trying to draw it. It was impossible for him to outdraw it. So then we're all excited, we're going to win and everything else. The rock came down, and it touched our front one. And what happened, if you put ice on the running or the striking surface of the rock, it'll kind of just slide. It won't click, move over. It'll just kind of take the contour of the rock that they're hitting, and that's exactly what happened. It was like I don't know what you call it. You know how when you putt a ball and it goes in the hole and comes out again?
Mm-hmm.
That's the type of action he had on that rock. And you know how we found out we lost? They had to measure it with a deck of cards.
Oh, wow. So they slide.
We couldn't get a thing to measure it with.
Yeah.
We were all there, the 3 of us. That's how we lost.
And was that the final game to go to the Brier, or was that?
No. It was but semifinals. Then we lost in the semifinals again the following year, and that was it.
And you were still playing with Senior at the time, so he's in his 70s, and you're in your early 20s. Wow, and so there's like a 50-year gap between the two of you, but it sounds like...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but...
Oh, he was unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
He was a legend. He was a legend.
And so were you in awe? I mean, what was the Granite Club then at that time? It sounds like it was held in extremely high esteem within the curling community within Winnipeg and maybe even wider in Canada at that time.
Oh, yeah. It's world renowned because, now some of the guys come from Europe and curling in the Catskills. I mean, they'll stop at the Granite and throw rocks. So they know about it. And the fact that we were over to curling in Europe, everybody knew about the Granite. But the thing about the Granite is the fact that, it was available, and it's a great curling club. It has been for years and years and years.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like when you were a young player, they were very accommodating and encouraging.
Well, when we were in juniors, they used to say, "Okay, you guys are going in the bonspiel." I say, "The bonspiel? Yeah. Here's the car tickets for you, and we'll give you a couple of dollars to have a burger or whatever you want. But you go in the bonspiel." And I used to go with Brian Derrick, myself, my young brother, and the other girl was the boss.
Mm-hmm.
And it was great. We never lasted long, but we had some good games. We were never apart.
And then, so in 57 the first time you curled with Junior?
So 56. We started in 56.
Okay, yeah.
With Junior, and there was my brother Gerry, my brother Lorne, and I.
Mm-hmm.
And we played. We weren't very successful the very first year.
Mm-hmm.
And then Gerry went on. I forget where he went to play curling with a couple of his friends. So then the following year, 57, we got Bill Sharp from Manitou. He played third. I played second, and Lorne, my younger brother Lorne, played lead. And we won.
Yeah. I was going to say, how was the dynamic with the 3 brothers then for that season? Was that part of...
it was pretty good.
It was good?
Yeah, it was pretty good. Yeah. I always thought I was a better curler than him, and he thought he was a better curler than I was. We got along pretty good.
Yeah.
we're very good.
Oh, really? So there's a lot of competition between the three of you a little bit, or just you and your older brother, Gerry?
Just me and my older brother, Gerry. He was good. He was a good track guy. He's the first guy to go under 10 seconds in the 100-yard dash in Canada. And he was a boxer. He was a curler. He played for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, the Calgary Stampeders. So he was a pretty good athlete.
Mm-hmm. So did he choose to leave that year then in 57?
Yeah, he went, and I can't remember the name of the team he went with. And, he had curled with Howie before in the Bonspiel that won the 4 cars. So I think after that he went and tried something and came back to play with Howie after.
And I want to touch on that. I know that was a big event, I guess, right? Because it had never even really been tried before. Do you remember how that came about? Was it promoted to kind of create this type of event? Was it pretty phenomenal in curling at the time that it was a whole different level, I guess, of competition, right?
Oh yeah, they come from all over, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and everything else. The who's who of curling was there at that time, and it was quite an event, a good event. I don't know how they managed to buy all the cars and put on the Bonspiel at the same time, but they did it. And apparently they made money. But you know what? Strange thing, I don't think they had it.
And it wasn't, because curling was very much, and particularly out east, considered to be an amateur sport and proud of being an amateur sport. And there was, conflict that was starting to arise around whether there should be money available. Where did you stand on that as a young player who was entering the game?
Well, I thought if they have a car bonds, never thought about cash bonds when we were young. But that business of Ontario called us professional, and they wanted to ban us from going to the Brier or anything else. But a guy by the name of Bill Lumsden, he was president of the Canadian Curling Association, and he threw that notion out from. So we did. Curling was a big thing in Western Canada not because of the weather, but for the number of curling clubs we had, and whether it was Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, wherever it was, we had a lot of curlers and a lot of Bonspiels.
So in that 57 team, you made your way to the Brier. Now, what was the path through Manitoba at that point then in 57?
The trouble was that you played straight knockout. Mm-hmm. You had 32 teams, 16 on each side, eh? And I think straight knockout, and it was a grind. And they just drew the names out of the hat. And at that time, one of our most biggest competitor in curling to win prizes and trophies and everything else was always Strathcona Curling. And we look in the draw, and wouldn't you know it, there's 4 teams of Strathcona in our division, and there's nobody in the other. So we just knocked ourselves out 6 games, and we made it to the final, and we played a guy by the name of Lorne Leach from St. Vital. He used to own a printing, and it wasn't even close, the final game. But I tell you, we went back to Howie's place, and he ordered Chinese, and he was so excited because he finally won a provincial title, as his dad had won 3 times or 4 times. I was so tired for sweeping, and my brother was tired for sweeping, and of course we're just young, and I fell asleep with my face in the Chinese. I was so tired. Was
that the moment where you decided that sooner or later you're going to play back end?
No. I was quite happy playing second. I really enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. And we go to Kingston, Ontario, and by train, and that was a real man.
Oh, that's right. You got to take the train.
Oh yeah, you were there for days. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we get to play the very first game. We're playing a guy by the name of Redstone.
Well, before you get to Kingston, I want to ask you about the train. I ask everybody about it that was on it because the stories are fascinating. So with you guys, you would have met. So is that the first time you meet some of these other teams, right? So Matt Baldwin in particular,
that's right.
Would have probably stopped in Winnipeg. I think he even mentioned to me that they played an exhibition or something before heading out. And so what was your impression, especially as a young guy, meeting a lot of these different players and characters?
Oh yeah, it was exciting for us. It was like, all these guys have won different things, and you're 21 years old or 22 at that time, and Lorne's 18, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
But, they had a car way at the back end of the train, not quite the very last.
Not the caboose. close, but just right near it. Yeah.
But that's where the booze was, eh?
Yeah.
So guys like Jack Wells and Johnny Esau and all these guys, it was unbelievable. You couldn't see in the car for smoke. McDonald, Brier, these guys are smoking and drinking. And of course, here we are, 18 and 21, and Howie says, you guys aren't going down there. You guys are not going down there. Okay, so we just kind of sent train plate.
Oh, so you guys didn't partake in too much of the partying. I guess at that point,
no.
Technically, Lorne would have been too young, right? I think the age at that point.
Yeah, that's right.
Technically.
Yeah.
But were most of the guys pretty friendly, though? It was a good camaraderie?
Oh, they were, yeah. There's one thing about curlers, no matter what year it was or anything else, they're very congenial, they're polite. There's some guys that are a little rough on the edges, but by and large, the curling are just great, and they don't forget. They'll see you at a bus, they'll say, hey, how are you?
Yeah.
They're good people.
So sorry, you were going to mention that first game in Kingston, so your first Brier appearance, your first game?
Oh, yeah, we played Redstone. He used to smoke a cigar. He used to slide, and he was low. And the cigar would be about a quarter of an inch off the ice all the time. And anyway, we're playing on the far sheet. So this is our opening game at the Canadian Championship, 18 and 21-year-olds. And, God, the place, I don't know if you remember the old amphitheater in Winnipeg. Do you remember that?
No.
Yeah? Okay, and it was just a small arena, held about 5,000 people. Well, this place was packed to the roofers. Anyway, we're playing Redstone, and he's one of the favorites, and we're playing him, and we're just hammering the hell out of him. And they will score in the 10th end. They're 12-end game. We're 6 up. And Redstone says, I've had enough of this. The ice is tough for me, and they start shaking hands. Oh, we're out of the gate really good. So anyway, this guy comes running down from the stand. He's got a big, long fur coat from the shoulders down to his shoes, and it's, I can't remember his name. Anyway, an official from the Canadian Curling, you can't quit. You got to play. He said, what? And Redstone says, no, we're quit. You've got to play the full 12 in. So anyway, away we go. So anyway, we're 6 up, we're nonchalant, anything else. Make the long story short, they got 3 and 10, 3 and 11, 3 and 12, and stole one in the extra.
Oh, no.
I thought how he was going to hang himself.
Oh, no, and that's not a great way to start the event at that point.
No, terrible.
Yeah.
We had a struggle, and then we ended up, we finished third in the whole overall thing. Matt Baldwin won. There's the guy. He was my idol then when I first saw him.
Oh, was he? Yeah.
Anyway, that was our experience.
Yeah. Did you have a chance to spend any time with him at that Brier or meet him or?
We went up to the room. Jack Wells and Jack Matheson had, and they were having a little bit of a party. So we went up there, and he was there, and he's a good-looking dude and dressed well, and just a great curler. And he said, "You guys, I tell you what, you're a couple of shots away from winning state." He realized that we were a pretty good team and everything else. And he said, but he was good. He was outstanding. As it did in 1971, he won again, Alberta, and I played him in Quebec City.
In Quebec City, that's right. And he was quite a bit older then. Yeah, years removed from his first win in '54.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you returned home to Winnipeg, was there a couple of things that were in your mind? One was I want to get back to that event, and two, this should be easy. I've been close a couple times. We made it there. I'm going to be back a bunch. Or was there a recognition that it's a tough road to get to that Brier? Like, how did you feel about your game then at that point?
Well, I thought my game was good, and my brother's game was good, but he was iffy about curling. He didn't, he wasn't that keen on the confrontation and the strategy involved and the nervousness and everything else. But I kind of loved it. I loved the closer the game, the better I liked it, because if your shot, you made a good shot to set the end up, I felt real good about that. But it was a learning experience, let me tell you, curling, because Manitoba and Saskatchewan had some great curling. I mean, no matter what hospital you went to, you did. And Western Canada dominated curling.
Well, the very next year, another Granite team came out, and that was the Braunstein rink. So you must have known all those guys. They were pretty close to your age. You probably saw them come up through the Granite club. Do you remember your first? Do you remember your first time meeting Ray Turnbull? What do you recall that?
No, I didn't really know him that well. Yeah. I talked to Terry a couple of times, but Ray, I got to know that later on in life, but I didn't know him that well.
Not at that point when they were.
They were pretty.
A few years younger. Yeah. Was it? Did you play them through that stretch there, where they had their kind of miracle run through the province in '58?
No, we didn't. We didn't play them till. I didn't play them till 1963. I think was the last time. I played them, yeah. Quite a way down the road.
Okay.
But that was a great year for them, 58.
Oh, no, but I was wondering, in 58, did you play against them in 58 when they were battling at some point?
No, we didn't make it in 58.
Okay. And then, so how did the team for 65 get formed then with Terry? What was the start of that? You got to get,
Terry?
Yeah.
So that was about 1964.
Mm-hmm.
That I got with Terry. We bounced around a bit after 57. After Gerry came back, and Gerry, myself, Lorne, and got a fellow by the name of Jack Roberts, and we played, and we come close a couple of times, but just couldn't get it going. And then Gerry to Chicago, and I looked around, and I picked up a couple of guys, and we played together, and that took me to about 1964.
So had you been skipping yet at that point a little bit, or had you mostly been playing third?
No, I always just played second or played third. I never skipped. But I knew a lot about the game, and I was fairly young. I thought
Well, and there was a lot of that, right, at the time, that skips tended to be a lot older.
Yes, that's right.
And when you saw Terry, that probably was a bit of a difference as well. You saw, well, here's a guy who's even younger than me, and he's had some success. I don't know if that kind of stuck with you at all, because that was a change at the time, right, where younger guys started to say, I can hold the last rock.
Well, if you look, Lorne was 18 when he played in the Brier in Kingston. He was the first young guy. Then, of course, there was me. All the other guys were, maybe anywhere from 5 to 25 years more in the early. So, that started. And then for the Braunstein team to come along as young as they were, you could see the change coming. And, they're both from the Granite Curling Club, these teams. And so I think that spurred other curling clubs to start a junior program, and they all started to do it. They're sons of the members that are curling at, say, the Civic Alley or the Helmet or wherever. More young guys got involved.
So that was almost kind of an early golden era of curling a little bit, maybe that late 50s and the early 60s, right? And the first car spiel kind of coming out of the war, sort of probably coming a few years after the Second World War. And did you, so at this point, though, is when some of your career started, were you starting to find a balance between life and curling at that stage towards the mid-60s, or were you still very focused on curling?
I focused a lot on curling, but, the Granite Curling Club, you talk about curling in Winnipeg, like we had something like 24 curling clubs. At the Granite Curling Club, we had 9 sheets of ice. We had 12 divisions with 12 teams in each division. We had 144 teams of Granite. That's the men's. So we used to curl Saturdays and Sundays because that's how many we got curlers. Now, go to the Granite Club, and I don't think they have 60 members.
Yeah, really?
Which is a shame. Mm-hmm. But things are opening up here now because there's curling clubs closing, and their curlers are coming to the Granite Curling. Not all of the Granite Curling Club, but they're doing a good job of marketing the Granite. They're getting more customers and more curlers all the time coming to Granite, only because of other curling clubs closing down. In those days, curling was a huge, huge sport. The Manitoba Bonspiel, you used to get 860 teams, 1,100 teams in the Manitoba Bonspiel. And the funny thing about it, my father-in-law, not then, but my father-in-law was the head honcho at Manitoba Curling. Him and one girl who ran the office, they ran the whole show. 1,000 teams. They used to be able to put up the draw, do all these things. Now they got 20 people working at Curl Manitoba, and I don't know what they're doing. Curling is dying.
One question I want to ask you about the Granite, because when I was a young junior, I remember it was always sort of a rite of passage to try to get the passcode to get upstairs into that where the snooker table was in the pool hall upstairs. How old is that room? Was that secret sort of men's? I don't know what you call it, men's lounge up in the upper stairs. Was that there many years ago, or when did that go in?
Oh yeah, sure. They used to play pool up there. They used to have crap games up there. They do everything.
Oh yeah.
And down below in the basement they had. We had lockers, and there must have been 4 guys in the booth at that time, and we had tables downstairs, and the guys would drink all hours of the night.
Yeah.
It was fun.
So that upstairs room, did you have to be a certain age? Was there a rite of passage where you were sort of allowed either into that basement or the upstairs? Or? Yeah.
As long as you remember the men's division, you could go up.
Okay.
No matter what.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Juniors, no, I don't think they could get up.
Yeah, I remember as a junior, you just need to know someone that knew someone who knew the passcode, and then we'd sneak upstairs and play some pool.
Yeah. It's still going today, but not as active as it was.
Yeah. So in '65, you make your way. You're playing on the Braunstein rink at this point. You'd played with them the year prior with that same squad, and you found success again. This time you're playing third with Terry. How did that relationship go? Did you guys see the game similarly? Did you have similar ideas on strategy?
Terry was an excellent, very knowledgeable. about the game. He spent a lot of time studying it and everything else, and he was a great guy about playing the perfect weight for the perfect shot. Mm-hmm. He was ahead of the curve, I'll tell you that. Because he knew what I was more like. I'd like to throw a little bit more weight all the time, and that's the only problem we had between him and I. If I hit and rolled out, I'd say, "Jesus, Terry, the ice too much ice." He says, "No, Donnie, you threw a little bit too hard." You know, this type of thing. Mm-hmm. But he was a great skip, but a great person. He may be one of the finest guys curling's ever seen, really.
And so in '65, did everything just sort of click that season? What really kind of led you to that?
We lost a heartbreaker in '64 to Herschel Erner. Mm-hmm. We were playing to qualify over at the Granite Curling Club, and we were 2 down coming home, and they had a corner guard up, and we drew one around, and you couldn't hit it because it barely buried with draw weight. Well, Bobby Lemec, who played for Herschel, would come down, and he's playing a takeout. And I said, "Terry, we're going to have to play an extra end here. Unless they miss again, then we'll win." He says, "Oh, yeah, he can't hit that." Well, but then he's coming, and it looks like he's going to miss it by a foot. It must have picked up something because it coursed right over and hit ours right on the head. And I tell you what, that frustrated Terry to no end. I think he missed his next shot.
Yeah.
The game was. So anyway, we were very frustrated. 65, different than that. We decided we'd go in a few more bonspiels and fine-tune our game, and we did that. And we played pretty solid. So we had heartbreaks. 65, 63, we had problems. Terry was great.
So in 65, getting to the Brier out of Manitoba a challenge, or did you guys have any difficult
it was
games?
A challenge. Yeah. It was a challenge. There were a lot of good players. Mm-hmm. Bruce Hudson and all those other guys. I mean, they were strong players. But we had a good young team. Lots of good sweeping and everything else. So we were very, very... So
getting back to the Brier for now, this is your second appearance. Did you feel a lot more confident? Was it a different event for you at that point?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. We did. We feel confident, because we played well. We were making our shots, and we were running some guys off the board, and other guys we had tough games with, but we squeaked through because we were patient, and there wasn't very. There was no animosity at any time between Terry and I. Ray was a little flammable. That's part of his game.
So from that era, what's the best Ray story you can tell us then?
Ray Turnbull story?
Yeah, what's the best story around that era when you played with him with Terry?
Oh, well, we were playing in the provincial playdowns today. We were playing a guy by the name of some guy from Porsche, I can't remember his name. Errol Painter. Anyway, and he's making shot after shot. And Terry had a chance to make a shot, and he missed it, or hogged it. So Terry hogged it. Ray gave that thing such a boot, and he turned around and walked down the ice. And so you could just see he's boiling mad. He kicked the rock as hard as he could, but he didn't hit it with the sole of his foot. He hit it with his toes.
Yeah.
So I walked down, and I said, "What the hell do you do?" I think I broke my toes. That's all he could say. I broke my toes. Oh, he was volatile. Anyway, he kept being volatile for years after that.
Yeah.
We played in seniors one time. We lost a game in Swift Current to some guy from, I don't know whether it was Ontario or whatever, and he was so mad. He came out, and we lived right across the highway where our hotel was, and there was 1.5 feet of snow. He walked right across that, up to his waist of snow. He was so mad.
And that's in the seniors. So
that's in the seniors. Yeah.
So his level of I guess he was always a fierce competitor. Then he sort of had a football player mentality.
I don't know whether he was a fierce competitor or he had a loose fuse.
Fierce temper, I guess. Yeah. Okay. So he didn't like to lose.
He was,
didn't like to lose.
No, that's true.
Yeah. How about you? So, how about you, Don? How did you take losing? Were you someone that could shake it off? Or?
Yeah, I got a little volatile at times. I just, you sit there and you practice, and you never miss the broom, or very seldom miss the broom. You throw the right weight and everything, and some guy comes out and slides right and shoots left, and he makes the same shot. You think, Jesus Christ, what are you? This type of thing.
Yeah.
The guy says, "Hit the broom this time." I said, "I don't know why you hold the broom from. He's not hitting it." There's a lot of things like that.
Well, yeah, some of those games, right, where your team makes everything and their team seems to be missing everything, yet some fellow who you've maybe not even heard of before can't miss. And it's
we played a guy in the provincial playdowns one year, and this is leading up before we won in '65. We played in the final. We lost in the final. We had last rock, and we're trying to put up a guard to get around. No, we didn't have last rock, so we're putting guards on. Mm-hmm. So now these guys are going to run the guard. The guy would throw it about a foot wide and tick it. He ticked it over to the boards. It didn't touch the boards, but stayed there. So we put up another guard. The guy comes down, same guy. He's going to hit it. He throws it about a foot inside. He ticks it. that goes to the other divider. And this is an honest story. By the time Terry come to shoot his first rock, there's nothing in play. There was 4 rocks on the boards on the left-hand side, 4 rocks on the right on the board side. Unbelievable. I couldn't believe it.
He'd have been a great lead in the modern era with the tick shot, for sure.
Yeah, is that right? Terry says, let's quit. I said, we're not quitting, Terry. We're going to keep playing. He said, well, we'll save our energy for the next game. I said, Terry, let's try and win this game and then worry about the next game when we get there. Oh, yeah, we lost the game.
Did you make the comeback in
that? No, we lost.
You lost that
one.
No,
we lost. Yeah, we lost the bad ones, really bad ones.
Mm-hmm. What's the most heartbreaking loss you can think of then that comes to mind? Is there anything?
I think that Hirschfelder loss was really tough on us. They're just starting out, just getting really into swim. You know, we won car bonds fields together and everything else. But you know, I think that we were the best, one of the best teams. Norm Hulkwood team, but we were the best of the rest of them, and we should have won more than we won. I mean, Terry should have won more than one Canadian championship. He really should have. Mm-hmm. He deserved it.
In 65, was that, I'm trying to recall now, and of course I spoke to Terry, so I'm trying to recall the specifics, but was it was there a close battle towards the end of that week, or were you guys in pretty good shape in terms of the round robin
in 65?
format? Yeah.
Yeah, we had to lose the last game, and then we'd be in a playoff. And it would be against the guy from Saskatchewan. You know. Anyway, we did play some guy by the name of Paulie Blank from Northern Ontario. No, he's given his jabs left and right and everything else. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got him pretty good. But anyways, that was it. That was a fun.
And you got to go to at the time was the Scotch Cup. What was the? So at the time, the Brier was really sort of the mountain to climb in Canadian curling. What was the Scotch Cup considered then at that point before you went prior to your first trip there?
I think everybody that went to the Scotch Cup said, well, we're just going to go through the motion here because, you know, you had curlers from the United States and Norway and Germany and everything else. And they were just getting into it really good. And not to say they were bad curlers, but they weren't the caliber of Canadian champions. So we went over there saying, well, you know, we should be world champions. Mm-hmm. But we never digested it enough to say, God, wouldn't it be nice to be called a world champion, you know? A world champion of your sport. So we went there, and Ronnie couldn't come because he was writing medical exams at that time, so we took a guy by the name of Gordy McTavish. Gordy McTavish, he was a judge. Nice guy, good. He looked after the juniors, president of the Manitoba Curling Association. He was just good. He was a good people person. And he spent a lot of time in the Granite. McTavish name is very well known in curling all over. Anyway, but he helped Terry and the guys when they were here, and when I was. So he said, let's take Gordy. What a great thing this would be, going to Scotland. Gordy McTavish. So we asked him, and he was absolutely elated. He couldn't believe it. So anyway, he was so excited. So we took him to Scotland. The only bad problem when we were curling, he was over in the boards talking to past relatives and everything else. But he was a nice guy at curling. Mm-hmm. And anyway, we went over to think we could win. And the ice was terrible. The ice was, I bet you if it was 6 inches thick, it was a foot and a half thick. So the pebble wore off very quickly. It got very swingy. Then you had fog on the ice. Terry would hold the broom, and all I could see was from his waist up. You couldn't see the rock and try to hit. But you went down. You looked at the rock where it was in the ring. The judge's broom. He would hold it up a little straighter so you could see it. And that's how we curled one game against Chuck Hay in Scotland. And then we played the boys from USA, Bud Somerville, and that was for us. Absolutely. It's one of those games where you couldn't do anything right, and they couldn't do anything wrong. You know, it was unbelievable. It was sickening. I was sick after that. I was really annoyed that we lost that final. That was maybe the biggest loss. So
at the time, you still understood, like you felt the weight of it, even though I think to a large extent the Brier was the goal.
Yes.
So do you feel like maybe in taking someone like Gord, do you feel like maybe you took the event too easy, or do you just think it was a bit of a letdown as well, or also didn't maybe have the same scope? But to you personally, you kind of felt it and you understood when you lost that it still had a weight to it. Maybe more so than before you went, even.
I'll tell you, after that, we went to the dressing room and changed, and the guy comes running and says, Bud, he says, the president of the U.S. is on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
I had to get out of there, so I went outside. I went outside the England room. I was so mad, so upset with myself, and what happened was terrible. And I said to myself, well, I tell you one thing, I'm coming back here, and I'm going to come back here. I'm going to have a different attitude.
Now, but you almost didn't come back because you, by the late 60s, you were prepared not to curl anymore, at least not competitive. Was that sort of the case?
Terry and I curled after 65. We curled together in 67, 68, and then he stepped down for skipping, and I skipped in 69, and we lost the semifinal of the province. And I thought, this is enough. I got to start doing a little bit more work, a little less curling.
And that was your first year skipping. So 69 was actually your first year,
at
least from a competitive
first year
team.
Skipping. That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly right. And we did really well. We lost the semifinal to the eventual winner, Bobby Robinson. We should have won, except they gassed a bad draw. Anyway, so that was it. And then what happened after that, Rod Hundred? He said, listen, Jim Pettapiece said, listen, you got to come to a great team. And I drove with Rod before. And he's a super. I didn't know Jim Pettapiece that way.
And did you know Woody at the time as well?
Yeah, no, I knew Woody. I knew Woody from curling in Brandon and that. I knew a lot about it. Yeah, he was a good player. So when he came on the team, so I said, okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. We'll start, we'll play, we'll go in the Transco and Bonspiel, and we'll go in the other bonds. So we went in the Transco and won that, never lost a game. Then we went to another Bonspiel and won it. I thought, okay, that's pretty nice.
Was it a surprise to think that you just sort of jumped into this? You hadn't even really been playing much that year, had you?
Well, the big thing is that Ray and I started curling school in 68. Okay. And we started curling schools and everything else. Started in Winnipeg, and then we went to Edmonton, then to Montreal. And first year, and how it started our curling, we were watching at the arena watching the Women's Canadian Championship, and they were sliding on the, then they were sweeping backwards. And Ray said, God, this is terrible. I don't know whether it was Ray or me said to have a curling for these women. He said, hey, do that. Why do we do that? So I went and I booked the Granite the very next day, and we put an ad in the paper saying, learn to curl and Duguid Turnbull. And we had 200-something apps right away. $12 a week. The only trouble is we were on the ice from 8 in the morning till about 11 o'clock at night every day.
And did you have a plan for it? How did you, like, I guess my first question, this is an important one. So you slid with the toe, or what we now call the tuck slide. Yep. Very distinctive, something that carried on and is still used by many players today, predominantly Manitoba players. And Ray was not. He was a flat foot, and he had a much different delivery. So
he was a flat foot. He slid on the left-hand side of the foot. But we decided we looked at Ernie Richardson's delivery, we looked at Joyce McKee's delivery, we looked at everybody's delivery and said, now here's something, Ray. Look at this. Ernie Richardson is 6'3". He hardly lifts the rock for throwing it. Joyce McKee is 5'0", and she's got a backswing like Bob Pickering. Mm-hmm. So that's a good start for our program in curling. So we put the whole program together and then had the strategy thing all mapped out, what we were going to talk about. To add legitimacy to our strategy curling, we invited Ernie Rich and Hector Vay to come and do our strategy session. Well, that was great.
Yeah.
That's good. And it was super. We were tired, but boy, I tell you what. Then Wally Ursulak joined us, and we went to Edmonton and teach. And some of you heard about it in Montreal. We went and taught in Montreal for 2 weeks, lived in the basement of the curling club. So it was kind of neat how it all came together.
Was it a little bigger than you expected it at that point then? Did it take on a life of its own?
Yeah, I mean, what do you do with 200 people? We charged them $1,200 at $12, for lessons that took, let's see, they were there for a week. They got about 14 hours of curling lessons for $12.
You decided, though, in terms of the slide, you didn't necessarily, you were going to sort of teach a flat foot.
You couldn't teach tuck. And to this day, they don't teach tuck.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand it. We got millions of dollars invested in the Canadian Curling Association. We got all these coaches and all these people in Winnipeg running Manitoba curling, and they call them advanced curling. They wouldn't take in tuck deliveries. I don't understand it. I don't understand.
Well, when you were starting those camps, then, so you didn't teach any tuck? Was that was a decision?
No,
okay.
No, we did. No, we did, because it was simple to do the especially for women. You don't see very few women tuck, but then you see lots of, the Jeff Stoutons and all the other guys in curling, and they do it. They don't do it now, and they should, because the kids now, we got Manitoba kids now curling, and then I bet you 50% of them tuck, because it gives you a better perception of your nose is right behind the rock, you're wide or you're narrow, it's just a matter of weight. But the worst thing we had this beautiful program, and the future was looking good. We come out with books the next couple of years, and the whole program, and we put exams into it, and it was great. And, sweeping instruction and everything else was great. Strategy was great. And the only thing we didn't register, and we didn't tap, because not too long after that, Canadian Curling Association got a hold of it, because the president was in Vancouver, and Warren Hansen was in Vancouver, And they saw it, and they said, well, look, here's what we're going to do. And the reason they saw it is because one of the ladies phoned me. She said, Donnie, would you do a clinic just for Manitobans? I said, sure. What do you want to do? I said, well, this is what we wanted. I said, you know what? I can't do it because I don't have the time to do it every weekend because I've got trying to look after my job and everything else. But I tell you what, you get the people and we'll have one school for 3 or 4 or 5 days, and I'll teach them how to teach curling. Would that be accepted? I said, okay. So anyway, she goes back and she gets $20,000 from O'Keefe Brewery to do it. So anyway, she told the Manitoba Curling Association. The Manitoba Curling Association told the Canadian Curling Association, and they come back and phoned the president in Vancouver and said, we got a guy here, Donnie Duguid's going to teach curling. This is for the women only. And they got funding, they got everything. What did he say? He says, no, don't let them do that. If they're going to do it, they have to do it for the men and the ladies. And then what happened is Lord Hansen got his program together from our books and everything else. He started for his. Mm-hmm. They invited me a couple of times to see it, and they were way off base in a lot of things. So they would ask me, and I would tell them, and it didn't work. But if we had had it, they wouldn't have been able to do that because it's all over the world now. Very, very, very few different, other than not lifting the rock. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I wonder, so it was competitive then, right? Kind of at that time, again, another sort of boom era for curling. All the baby boomers were getting a certain age in the 70s. Yeah. And so do you feel like maybe you made some missteps there and maybe could have done better if you had done some things differently then? Or you just think the politics got involved? Yeah.
Yeah. There was politics among Ray and I. That was not a problem, but it was, he had more free time than I did. Mm-hmm. I have a job to look after. I have a large family. And, he was an insurance agent, so I'm not to tell you about
it. Yeah. I know.
They make very few calls.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So that team, you really kind of struck gold or lightning or whatever you want to call it in terms of that squad, right? With Pettapiece and Woody and Rod.
Yeah, for sure.
And again, you're talking about flat-footers. Rod Hunter, I mean, you were the original Tucker, and Rod had one of the most phenomenal flat-foots. But you just clicked. Everything really worked. Was there ever a time then over those couple of seasons where you guys felt like you walked out on the ice, and did it just sort of seem as if it was inevitable? I mean, I'm sure you worked at it and you had to work hard at it, but what was it like, I guess, through that run?
Well, when I said we got into those two bond spills and won them, you watch Brian, he's got a kind of a different delivery. He kind of gets away out there and to rock back a lot, so it curls a little bit more, At the end, he's got that little soft release. And Pettapiece, you threw the helicopters down the ice. But I read all the ice from Rod Hunter because he was calling the arrow, and he was an arrow. He was absolutely fluid. At the broom, I don't know how many games he played. Maybe 120 games. Oh no, to maybe 200 games. I think he maybe missed twice.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, he was that accurate and that good. And so that was our secret. Our secret, Brian and Jimmy were just strong. They may be the best front-end curling I'm not going to say Canada or the world, but in Manitoba. And Manitoba was the best curling province in the world. And those two were the best by far. Nobody could come to Brian or close to Jimmy. They were that good. So it made my job a little bit easier, but after going through all the curling schools and strategy and everything else, that helped me in my approach to curling, to skipping, which I hadn't done for all my life, except for 69 and then 70. So it really helped me there. So that combination of the great front end we had, and Rod Hunter being a great curler, and my skipping knowledge, it was just, we were dynamite. We went to Bonspiel. I tell you, we knocked off all the best curlers. We went to Manhattan, Bonspiel in Toronto at Maple Leaf Garden. Ernie Richardson, Bob Pickering, Merv Mann, Ron Northcott, Matt Baldwin, they were all there. Mm-hmm. And we beat them all. Every last one of them we beat. And Hector Bay, we beat him in the final. And I don't forget, we were up having a drink in his room, and he beat us. He beat us in the first round robin game. And we were talking about it. He was a good friend of mine, and I love the guy. We went to actually a couple of months together. So we were in the room having a cocktail, and we were talking curling and everything else. That was a good game we had. And Hector, I tell you what, you missed one shot. And you beat us extra end. One shot, just you beat us extra end. I'm going to tell you as my friend, don't miss two. That's the next time we play. He laughed. He said, "No," he said, I know what you mean." He says, "I played you at the arena in the water." I said, "I know." Yeah. He's a good guy. And I played a lot of games with him, not a game with him.
And doing some of those clinics and that, and you did a bit of that with Hector, like you mentioned, and so it sounds like you were always still learning. You were always open to new ideas and try to learn about how to approach the game. Yeah. You never really, because some skips aren't like that, right? I think a lot of guys sometimes feel like they know it, they don't want to take in more information. Yeah. And that wasn't you. It sounds like because you entered skipping late, right? And it's interesting because you came to it late, right? Yeah. Yeah.
But you have to know the situations of when to go and when not to go. My theory has always been control the 6th, 8th end, and you'll win the game. Because if you control those 2 ends and get ahead of the guy by 1 or 2, and he scores, and you're 2 up playing the 9th end, he's got to score 2 to tie you, and then you got last rock coming home.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I wanted, was having last rock coming home, because I knew I could make it. And I had the team in front of me that would miss.
During that run there over those couple of years, was there anyone that you came up against that gave you some troubles? Was there anyone that you guys had some battles with?
Well, we played in 1970 in Winnipeg, and that was our first year together going to a Canadian trip. And, the guys we talked about, I said, I don't know whether I like this or I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
He said, Rod says, what do you mean? I said, well, we're playing in front of our hometown. What if we go 3 wins, 5 losses? I mean, everybody will say, oh, yeah, they weren't up. And I said, but if we go the other way around, if we get to 6-1 or 6-2, we're in the hunt. That'll keep people there, and we'll gain confidence. We'll get better, and all we can do is get into the playoffs. And he said, yeah, don't worry about it. We'll get there. I said, well, I hope so. Anyway, and we did it. I said, the only thing I want to happen is the very first games of this Brier, I want to play one of the top teams. Whether it's Hector Bay, or Bob Pickering, or Lyle Dagg, I want to play one of those teams, or Paul Savage from Montreal. I want to play one of those teams the first game. Rod says, why do you want that? I said, they won't know the ice. They won't know. I mean, if the ice is a little bit sluggish, we'll have an edge on them because we're better shooters than them. But you never know. So sure enough, it comes out, we play Hector Bay the very first game. About the 9th end or 8th end, the ice, we're losing the ice. The brine was running in. The ice was melting.
Mm-hmm.
So coming down, it was a close game. Coming down to the 12th end, Rod Nurse is the rock in front. He says, well, what do you want to do, Donnie? I said, well, let's draw around this one and hope it comes out the other side. The only shot Hector would have would be an outturn hit. And you almost had to throw it as hard as you could to get it in the ring because it was slushy. Not slushy, but damp. So anyway, sure enough, I hit it in there and it goes right to the D-line and it comes out the other side. Now, Hector with his delivery and his 400 pounds, he can't throw a draw. He's not comfortable with it. He's got to play a hit. Even a hit is tough for him, especially the outturn. And Rod says to me, we just won this curling game, you know that? I said, you think so? You think he's going to miss his outturn? He's a terrible outturn thrower.
Yeah.
Sure enough, he let it go. By the time he let it go, he had it missed. The only thing we were worried about is that it may stop on the other side and beat us out for the draw.
As a draw, and he's trying to throw a hit. Yeah.
Yeah, so you tried to hit me, it ended up being a draw. But anyway, so we won it. From then on, we just kept going. We had one bad game. Well, I had one bad game. That was against Lyle Dagg. Hitting for 5-1, I kicked the guard and rolled over, and I got 1. And he comes down. He was trying to hit it out, and he threw it at the shot rock. He threw it about a foot inside and hit one on the side. That's why I had to play that shot. And you got a little bit of an inside roll. So I go down ahead and I just kicked the guard and I rolled in for 2. I'm walking down the ice with Lyle Dagg to me. He didn't have to get 2 out of that. I thought to myself, I could kill this guy. And he saved his neck because looked like we were going to have a free draw for 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm.
He said that. So anyway, we lost in the long run. But anyway, lots of laughs.
I want to jump to this for a sec because I like to ask on gamesmanship. So, and it sounds like there maybe Lyle was getting in your head a little better. Did anyone ever try to do that? Like, were there some guys that you found tried to do that and, things that would annoy you or try and get your head? Yeah.
It's curling is a lot like golf.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch them on television now, they said, hey, there's a spot on the ice there, get it for throw. They're very together on these things. And it's the same thing with Pickering or Gervais or Ernie Richards and all those guys from Birdman. They're all gentlemen. They all know the game. And they don't play the gamemanship thing. Not at all. I don't forget the first time I saw Ernie, we went to a cash field. There was my brother, myself, Ray Turnbull, and I forget who the other fellow was. Anyway, our first game was against Ernie Richardson, and I walked out and I was like, this guy, there's a blue light around. He's got all these purple hearts on a white and green sweater. I'm like, oh, God, just so funny. We're going to get our can cleaned.
Yeah.
We actually.
So they would, and they'd come out with all their purple hearts every game?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. Sure.
Yeah. Just to let you know in case you weren't aware.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, so what do you think of the curling now?
Now?
You're a bit. Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like a different style of game in a lot of respects.
Sure.
Although it was interesting, Dan Carey had an interesting comment to me that I hadn't really thought of much, that with the way the ice is pretty consistent with massive swing all the time, yet you can still keep it straight when needed. There's a little less, and of course with the sweeping that happened last year, it was even more exasperated, but there's less of a focus on how perfect you are to the broom. And Dan had a great comment. He used to say, when the Peters rink was playing really well, when you had like 8 inches of curl, he thought they were fantastic because they all threw the same, and they could all throw at the same spot. And if they would hair that guard by, a piece of paper, and there was no way to take it out. Now it's, now in today's game, what's interesting is, a single guard doesn't really resolve anything anymore. You need to create a different environment to actually generate multiple points. Yeah. Right.
That's how the 2 and 3 and 4 rock rule, now 5 rock rule got in, because when you go to the Brier and everything, the ice was very, very straight and it couldn't bury.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what happened. Like I remember just out and losing to Martin, kid what year it was, but anyway, the score was 2-1.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're filming, you're on television, prime time and everything else. The score is 2-1. I mean, it just killed it. So they opened it up with a guard rule, which I like to a certain extent. I think it's getting a little out of hand. Now they won 5. Next year they probably say, okay, look at one end you draw, next end you hit. One end you draw, next end you hit. I mean, I don't agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, these guys are curling on the same ice all the time. They know arena ice because that's where they play all the Grand Slams and everything else. So that's why you see a lot more run backs in the game. You watch them, they put the broom right in the center of the rock and they throw it hard and it runs that straight.
Yeah, did you guys ever attempt to use run backs as an offensive weapon, or was it more usually just a defensive?
There was big swings in the ice and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
It was very hard to make run backs when the ice is cutting a foot and a half to feet. But you get outside the 4 foot on these arenas that these guys are playing in, that rock will not curl with any kind of weight. It'll stay up straight.
So I want to jump to that. So in 1970, you win in Winnipeg. I'm imagining that's a great experience, probably one of the greatest thrills, especially to be at home. And likely you were very much a calming influence, having been at those 2 previous Briers for the rest of the team. It might have been very different.
Yeah.
And then you returned to the Worlds again, and it seems like, especially when I look at the box scores, you were on a mission.
Yes,
mm-hmm.
Certainly were.
There wasn't a way you weren't going to take that event lightly at that stage.
No,
in your return. Yeah, it didn't look like, from what I recall. I mean, there were not any close games, or was there anything there that was where someone kind of held with you for a little bit? Because again, if I look at the scoreboards, it was a throttling pretty much.
Yes, yeah. Well, we were a very strong team, and we were all motivated, and me having lost the World Championship, I said, it's not going to happen, you guys.
Mm-hmm.
We got to bear down every end, every rock, and just keep going. If we get up 5, then maybe you can relax a bit, but let's stay focused. And it was. We never lost a game for 17 games, two World Championships. We've done that then and since.
Now that I want to jump to that, the 71 Brier is such a fascinating one because it was that Quebec City Brier that many people have spoken to me about. The snowstorm, just a wild experience. Yeah. What was the impact to your team with you guys? Like, how did the whole strangeness of the event kind of?
Well, it was strange for a lot of reasons. Number one, Quebec City, long flight, everything else. But we won our first game, and we couldn't get up the next morning to play, and there's a terrible storm overnight. You couldn't even see the front of the hotel. There was so much snow.
Yeah.
But anyway, so now our driver phone says, I can't come. It's impossible. I'm here. I'm stuck on my own driveway. And so we said, no. So anyway, I phoned him, find the room of a CCA executive and said, hi, Don Duguid, I'm in the lobby and everything else, and there's a terrible snowstorm, and I guess he just got out of bed. He says, so what do you want? I said, well, we got a curl in about an hour and a half, and there's no way we can get to the curling club. What do you want to do? Said, oh, geez, I don't know. Just leave it with me, and I'll get back to you. And I said, well, I'm down here in the lobby with a lot of other curlers. So anyway, nothing happened. Finally, they got snowmobiles. So we get us on the snowmobiles, and away we go. And we get to the rink, and I'm thinking to myself, well, what the hell are we doing here? What if the other team doesn't show up? Do we win by default, or do we cancel, or, what goes on? So, there was only 4 teams there. We were playing this guy from state who was giving us the remarks before we started. But anyway, so we got to play him. But anyway, he shows up and we play, and we walloped him. And but that was really bizarre. And the ice in Quebec, brutal. It wasn't so much the ice, but the rocks. There was pit marks on the running surface of the rock, and they would go down. If you were playing a draw, they'd go down and come back to the insert. It was just terrible. It was almost impossible to draw. And we lost to the guy from Thunder Bay with these rocks. They were hitting, and we were trying to draw in around corner guards. We had no chance. So anyway, I said to Rod, okay, Rod, we're going to throw nothing but hits. Nothing but hits. We maybe throw up a corner guard if we can get a corner guard, but we're going to throw nothing but hits. So anyway, we did that, and we finally qualified. 3 of us tied for first place. And so now he got a draw out of a thing. I said, Rod, I'm unlucky. You go draw. You get to buy.
Yeah, because you just drew a number, right, to determine who would.
Yeah, that's right. Just a number, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So we got the buy, and we played the guy from Northern Ontario again, and we beat him. But it was brutal curling. It was a nightmare, that whole Brier.
Yeah. So you finish off the Worlds again that year in 71. So at what point had you started to think that you were done with the competitive end of the game and it was time to focus on your business side of your life, other things, your family, and maybe there was the other parts of curling and the announcing piece. Had you started doing any of that yet, or had people approached you about it?
No, I hadn't started, but I was teaching curling. I was curling competitively, and I had my own job, and I was frazzled. Just on the go all the time. And I owned it. The company was really good. When we won on Utica, I had to stop in Toronto, and the president came out and took me in a limo, and they had a little reception for me at a curling club in Toronto. It was just absolutely outstanding. He never once said, Donnie, I'd like to see you retire or anything else. But he knew my sales were good. My sales manager was just a gem of a guy. He had my back every time. Because other people in the business, in the head office, say, well, how does this guy do his job if he's away curling all the time? Mm-hmm. And he would have my back and say, well, he's a world champion, so we let him. He doesn't take a summer holiday. All he does is he curls. He takes his holiday when he curls. So that was it. So anyway, I owed it to them and I was seriously thinking of doing it anyway. And I thought, well, that's enough for me to get off this ride. And as much as I wanted to, I didn't want to go, but I thought about it after. I thought, well, maybe it wouldn't have been nice to go the third time in the world and win it and go through undefeated. And 3 times in a row, haven't lost a game.
Did you ever mention so when did you mention it to the guys, to the rest of
I mentioned it to the guys when we were curling. I said, look at you guys, I don't know how long I can do this because I'm getting some remarks from the head office between that and curling school that I can't keep it up. And they said, okay, whatever you want to do, that's the way it meant. But they knew for that.
Yeah.
So anyway, they asked me, who do you think we should get? And Danny Fink showed up. I said, look at him. He's a pretty good fan. He's good curling. Good curler. Try that.
So do you think you would have been able to do that third year? You just mentioned that, maybe it's a bit of a disappointment. You think
I know.
If you'd have,
I like Boris Melishchuk. Boris Melishchuk is a good curler and has been years, but he didn't stand a chance with us if we had stayed on 10 more years. And he went on and would concentrate after that. And that's when I started television. Yeah.
So was it the very next season then that you got approached to do some TV coverage?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We auditioned for it, and I went and got it. And
so there was an audition. Who was it? Do you remember who else was in the audition?
No, they never tell you that.
Okay.
Yeah. CBC was CBC.
Wow, so you never heard, but even talking to other guys and the other curlers, no one.
No, they did. After I got the job, they said, "Yeah." Timmy Dole said, "Yeah." I went.
Mm-hmm.
I said,
yeah.
Yeah.
And when you approached it, were you a sports fan as well? Did you follow other sports? You kind of know some of the, you'd probably gotten to know, as you mentioned, Jack Wells, Jack Matheson, that type of thing. What was your?
For sure. Yeah, but you just call it as it is. Mm-hmm. I think, strategy was a big thing, mechanics, delivery, and everything else. It was good, but I worked with some great announcers, 2 great announcers. Don Chevrier, he had that great booming voice. He was just great.
Yeah.
And Don Whitman, who had a memory, you can't believe it. Amazing guy. He covered all sports. Both of them covered all sports.
So was there someone that you tried to model a bit of your technique after? Did you think about the approach, or did you just try to be natural?
Yeah. Producer always said, be yourself, call it as it is. I was critical a couple of times and, nice a couple of times, and, you just play it as go along. But when you're with Whitman or Chevrier, they just make everything flow. They actually took curling to center court, 2 guys.
And you think about it, your announcing career lasted considerably longer. And is it still going? I know
40 years.
Are you
40 years?
Have you officially retired from it, or are you still available for events at this point?
Okay, yeah. My last one was the Vancouver Olympics, and I did 5 Olympics, which is great.
Wow, yeah.
29 with CBC and 11 with NBC.
And did you now when Ray took on with TSN, did that create a bit of a rivalry there, or a friendly competition at all, or no?
Yeah. The nice thing with that for the game of curling is they got more exposure because they did the day games and we did the weekend stuff. But CBC should have known what was going on. These satellite people like TSN or Sportsnet or what's going on in the United States, CBC should have gotten involved a little better. But, they were up against it. They were paying guys $20 an hour to pull cable. Some of those guys on planes were making more money than Whitman and I. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe not Whitman, certainly not. But anyway, it's just...
Did you ever, when Ray was coming up, though, did you ever kind of tease him a little bit as he was developing?
No. I tried to, I give him some advice and everything else.
Yeah.
And I often complimented on their coverage and everything else. It was productive. They did a lot of curling.
Well, it's pretty amazing, right, that you think about the two of you, kind of came up at the Granite Club pretty close together. You a little ahead of him, but then became really known as the voices of curling for decades, right?
Yeah. Well, see, that's why, you asked earlier about the Granite, why it was so well known all over the place. Well, number one, that's where curling school started. We had the first meeting at curling right there at the Granite Curling Club. And then you talk about two announcers broadcasting curling for Ray, I think, was 25 years, and I was 40 years, so 65 years out of the Granite Curling Club. So that's the name that it gets.
Do you remember what's kind of a famous call that sort of sticks in your mind, something or an event from those days that you were at? And
a good event? Well, I think when Joan Meade was the producer and I, we talked about how we could dress up the show, and we decided to put mics on them. And one of the first guys we put mics on was Ed Wernick, and we just put it on him, not on anybody else. Then we introduced, and I introduced the telestrator to television in Canada on sporting events. So anyway, Wernick is playing this guy and everything else, and it was who was the guy? The guy from Alberta. His brother was a hockey.
Oh, Ed Lukwich. Ed Lukwich.
Fast
Eddie.
Yeah. He's standing on the other end and looking at a shot, and well, if I make a shot, Rich Pocket will watch. You're thinking, yeah, that's a shot. He said, look, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let it go a little late. You guys sweep the piss out of it. Well, Jesus Christ, you'd see people in the VIP lounge falling out, killing themselves laughing. Because that was the problem when we introduced the mics, is that the guy that's controlling the mics has to know when they're going to say something. And I spent a couple hours and said, if this guy misses a shot, don't open his mic right away because he's swearing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, so you got it. So anyway, we did a couple of games, and that's how we started. So he got down to science, and he was pretty good. So there's very little profanity in watching curling on.
Thinking back, so you're telling me that Ed Wernick was the first person that was mic'd in curling? Like what?
I'm not sure. I think so. I think you could be right.
I'm just thinking.
I don't recall.
That would not be my first. if I'm looking to avoid profanity.
True.
Oh no, I shouldn't say that. True. I shouldn't say that. If it's an adult station, I'm perfectly comfortable. In fact, he's definitely a guy you want to get some comments from. Yeah. But if I'm trying if I'm trying to avoid profanity, I don't know that Wernick's my first choice.
Yeah.
He could definitely tell it like it was, right? He's gonna.
Yeah, that's true. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
he was a character.
Yeah, sure.
He was a character. What a guy! There's a guy that knew angles better than anybody in the game of curling. He's a pool shot. He'd say, "Oh, we'll just hit it on the corner here." He was a great curler, Eddie. Great curler.
Yeah, so with all the coverage, you got to stay close to the game. You saw a lot of these different players, and the guys develop. Do you have a top 10 list in your head? So if you think about the players after your era, like if we start moving into the 80s, do you think about comparing eras or comparing players, or do you ever kind of sat around with a beer and chat about that? Or
oh yeah, we talked. Ernie, I used to travel to Saskatchewan. I knew Ernie really well, and we used to talk about things like that. Ernie Richardson knew his curling, I'll tell you that. He would say, this guy's outstanding, that guy's a great curler. You got to learn to make this guy throw the out turn. But, you look at the curlers, like you look at the Wernick and guy from Thunder Bay.
Al Hackner.
Al Hackner made one of the greatest shots in curling. He just kicked that thing. It's just some great shot making. And then you get the kick rock in the worlds with Horace Melishchuk. That's unbelievable stuff. There's a lot of things.
Were you there covering that Worlds in 72?
Yeah.
Okay, so you saw that occur. So what did you see when that happened? The famous.
Here's what I saw. When the guy jumped in the air, which is unfortunate for him, and he kicked it. He moved it in. Okay. But when I first looked at it, it looked to me like Horace Melishchuk had lost. But because he kicked it, they asked for a measure, rightly so. But the reasoning was that they said Well, we never had a chance to look at it. But if you look at the film, Dave Romano was looking at the rocks, and he knew who was shot before. So anyway, and not only that, he said, well, it's a burnt rocks. And then you see Healy, the second for Spellcheck, he was already moving rocks, so they were all burnt, But they definitely measured it, and Doug Maxwell went out there, and he was going to measure the wrong rock. Anyway, I was yelling down, the other rock, Doug, the other.
Yeah.
Anyway, they won the measurement, U.S., and they still had a chance to win, but they couldn't do it in the extra.
So that was your first year of doing announcing. So
that's my first year.
It's a pretty interesting event. I mean, it's a famous moment in curling, and you're barely a year at this. Must have been an interesting moment in terms of trying to how did you put it into context, or could you really in terms of talking about what was going on? It was so bizarre.
It was bizarre. But the other funny thing was first year in television, I go to New St. John's, Newfoundland, and like flying in there in March, it's life-threatening because it's windy, it's snowing, it's sleeting, it's hailing, and getting in and out of Newfoundland is very difficult. Anyway, we get there, and the producer now they want to have a grand open for the Brier in Newfoundland and everything else, and we go to Signal Hill, and we're up atop Don Chevrier in Signal Hill, and you look over at the harbor, like I don't know how many feet down, it must be about 300 feet down, this is the side of this mountain. But about 10 feet down is a cannon on a block of concrete sticking out there to protect the harbor. So anyway, the producer says, okay, you guys, Duguid, we're going to get you guys two down by the cannon and just hang on to it there. We'll take your picture of you and Chevinia and we'll do your opening there. So anyway, I go down and I'm standing by this cannon, and I mean, if you take 2 steps backwards, I'm in the bay, So I'm not very excited about this whole thing. So anyway, Don Cheverly's up on top, and they say, okay, Chevy, you go down. He said, no way, I'm not going down there. I don't care what you do. He said, Duguid, get up here. Yeah. This is crazy. So anyway, then they were going to go and get a swing stage in the harbor where there's a big ship in, and they were going to get us over the hull, chipping the ice off the ship. I said, we're not doing that. So we ended up doing it in the blocks above the arena, overlooking the ice. So that was about 100 feet up, I guess. And so we're sitting on this wooden board that's the fence around this block. The camera guy's up there, the handheld guy. The technician says, okay, in 10 seconds we're going to open you guys. Are you ready? Yep. Okay, which we're talking about? Yep. I've never been on television before. He said, okay, we're going to give you a countdown. He goes, 10, 9, 8. He says, don't worry about Duguid. 3 million people will be watching. Well, I'm telling you, my heart went in my throat. Anyway, but we got it done. It was pretty fun anyway.
So what you're saying is throwing a draw in the Winnipeg Arena in front of 10,000 people was way easier than just standing in front of the camera and trying to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's nothing. Because they changed it. It's the producer and the director. They want to do it right. It's just crazy.
One story, I hesitate to bring it up, but I remember it so vividly. Your daughter Jill was in the Canadian Junior final, and quite a team. She had Jennifer Jones playing third in 1991, and she had Kelly McKenzie, then who became Kelly Scott, so playing lead. Formidable team, and they played really well that week. They were in the final. It was a really close, low-scoring game, prior to free guard zone, and you're commentating this finals. And as anyone who knows, parents who watch their children play sports, it's more nerve-wracking to be the parent. So take me through even early in that finals what you're going through as you're trying to do your job, as well as you're watching Jill play.
Yeah, well, the producer came in and he said, are you okay for this? And I said, yeah, it's fine. I spent a lot of time with Jill teaching her and playing curling with her and everything and seeing her go through this thing. But I was on business that I went in early and watched her play a few games. When she got to the final, that was something. They were playing good, as was the other team. She had a chance to win. I felt so bad for her. The girl had a chance to draw in around the guard, and she went sailing through the house. So Jill's got a goal draw to the house to win the Canadian Junior, and she took a little bit off it, but not enough, and they swept it out the back end. So they lost because there was a biter on the corner. She was just devastated. She, at that age, they broke down. They had a great team. Like Jennifer was a great curler then, and she was super, super smart. And Kelly McKenzie, Jill took her in. She was 14 years old. 14 years old playing in the final. She learned a lot from that. But it was fine. I got over that. I just called the game the way it is. And I know Jill's weakness and her strengths and everything else. I never ever said that. I would say, this is an outturn. It's a tricky shot and everything else. Weight is a big thing here, that type of thing. But it it was a good game.
Jill was a little bit younger than me, but I grew up in that era playing juniors in Winnipeg, of course, and knew Jill. And I remember watching it. I mean, it was heart-wrenching for her, but I remember thinking, how is Don handling this in the booth? Because you're trying to do your job, right? And it had to be tough because I think it's, you're caught up emotionally and if I recall, even the last couple of ends were blanked. It was really tight, right, through the latter part of the game, and it was quite an event. And I mean, I'm sure you could afterwards probably share some of those stories that you shared with us here, where it's funny how, we talked about some of your wins, but at certain times I've heard you and you seem even more emphatic about some of those just devastating losses. Because they stick with you more, don't they, than the wins?
They do.
Yeah.
I can tell you almost all the games I lost, but I can never tell you all the games I won. So when when our team was put together in '70, I don't know how many games we played in the years, but I guess it was in the 180 mark. I bet you we didn't lose 7 games. That's how good it was. I mean, it's unbelievable how good these guys, how we all curled well. We had the occasional hiccup, no question about it. But by and large, when you look at it, we won 2 world championships, never lost a game. We went to the Brier here in Winnipeg. We finished 9-1. We lost 1 game to Red from BC, and we lost 3 games in Quebec City because the ice was so bad and no falls and all. It was just that. How we won that thing, I'll never know. How anybody won. It was so bad.
Yeah, I mean, there was some crazy games. I mean, like you mentioned, you lost some games that you probably should have won. I think Pickering lost, to Quebec in a wild one, I understand. And there's just some weird scenarios that can happen, and that happens in lots of events.
Well, it's a terrible thing when you don't know what the ice is going to do. You put them down by the rock and say, okay, I'm going to throw hack weight. You couldn't do it there. It was impossible to throw hack weight on the shot. You had to throw up weight, and if the thing picked up something, maybe it would carry it until he made it to the other end. It was terrible. It was terrible ice.
So you didn't completely leave the game, though. You played, here and there, and you did play in the Canadian Seniors, I think, one time, right?
Yes, we played. We played in the Seniors 3 times.
Yeah.
Never cashed in once.
And that was Did you play with Barry Fry?
Barry Fry. Ray Turnbull and Terry Braunstein 1 year. That was fun. Mm-hmm. Terry and I and Ray, we always talk about it. How in the hell did we let him skip? He's never won anything. And we kid him to this day. Oh, he was a good player.
Oh, I missed something there. Actually, I wanted to ask you about. So the Labonte curse, which you were at, and then you carried on. You were covering. Were you covering the Worlds all through the 70s as an announcer at that point? How is it that not necessarily some of them are
in 72.
72, but after taking 73 to 79, and you just mentioned Barry Fry, who lost in
Switzerland.
Yeah, in Switzerland. So what happened to Canada? Because the 70s, like you say, there was so many teams, probably had some of the largest depth of curling, maybe even a lot deeper than we have today, and certainly dominance over the world more so than now. What happened between 72 and 79? I mean, I don't believe in curses, so I don't imagine it was anything like that. What do you recall, or do you think it was just random, or was it just?
I just think that Europe was getting better all the time, and you couldn't afford to miss too many times against some of the teams. Switzerland was getting good. It was just one of those things. But you look at Sheldon Scary, he won in '73. That wasn't that good a team. But a lot of them, Otto Daniele, Bud Somerville. The only guy that I thought really had a good touch was Ragnar Camp. Those guys, they kind of vanished too. Otto Daniele, I know, was a good curler, and he's a good cook. He owned a hotel or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. He never ever came back to curl. So all these guys are just one shots, and I don't know who represented us. I can't remember. I think it was 73 and 74. I know Fry was
74 was 74 was Gervais. 75 was Tetley, and then
Right.
Yeah.
So
77 was Ursel.
When you go overseas or wherever you go, ice conditions are a great equalizer. And, if you go to Switzerland or wherever, it could be a problem. But, it's like them going, that's their first World Championship. It's like me going to our first World Championship in 1965. You think you can win and you should win, but you don't. And that's what I think happened to all the guys from Canada. It's really interesting.
Was there anything else I missed asking you, Don? Was there something that we didn't cover?
No, I think everything's covered. I'm just wondering where curling is going now. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of curling clubs closing. I think the curling fraternity is dwindling, and I'm wondering if it's because of the World Curling Tour, what's going on with the World Curling Tour, that the average citizen doesn't. I think when I listened to your thing with Terry, he said he doesn't like what's happening because the average curler doesn't have a chance to play anymore against any. They can go into the playdowns, but they're not going to beat guys that are playing, whether it's Reed Carruthers now or the name from Brandon.
Yeah, or McEwen or any of the
those guys. They don't mention
Kevin Cooey's.
I mean, you look at Reed Carruthers now. This guy is solid. That's solid. A solid team. They look a little rough around the edges. The guys in the front end, they're big guys, and they have trouble maybe getting down to the rock. But let me tell you, they are great curvers. They're making great moves. And the nice thing I like about it, you hear the conversation between them, and they're very compatible. Even when they miss, they're compatible. That's okay. They're good. They're an outstanding team. And Reed, if you imagine this, a few years ago he was playing second for Chest Out. Now he's skipping. I think he's second on the money list next to Nicholas Hayden, Sweden. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, but it does seem that, like you say, it's very different. And I don't know that. People sometimes want to lay blame on why things aren't the way they used to be, and the truth is that nothing is like it used to be. It's never the case.
No, that's right.
I tend to look at where curling's headed, and I think in some areas it's very positive and very progressive. In general, the grassroots piece of it is really changed, and so the challenge becomes, how do you recapture that participation? And I think back in the 70s and the 80s and in those times and in the 90s, there was an idea that just about anyone that played on a regular basis was a competitive curler. If you played in an A group at your club, you would consider yourself competitive, right? And though a lot of those teams really didn't have a good shot at a Purple Heart, there was always the odd Cinderella story. Sometimes things could happen, and a few of them once in a while actually did get to the Brier. That kind of hope and that mindset is really gone. The distance between the top teams, because there was always top teams then, and as there are top teams now, but that distance has really increased because of the time and the focus and the way they focus on the game and the conditions, as you say, because now, I mean, the club curling and arena curling is two different sports.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Sure. And where curling is to be honest, the World Curling Tour, which was started many years ago by two guys that were like
and Ed Lukowicz, actually Ed Lukowicz, who you mentioned earlier, had a big part of getting that started. Yeah.
And they done more for curling than the Canadian Curling Association did, because these guys practiced, played, and got better and better and better, so that when they got to the Brier, and they got to the World, they were really competitive. And the same thing with the women, although the women got bigger problems than the men have. So this group of guys are very, very strong curlers. Like, there's nobody better than these guys. The game has changed because ice changed, rocks changed, practice has changed for these guys, and they practice every day.
I think the big thing that's really changed is sponsorship. Even going, and it's it's not that long ago. If we go back 20 years or 20-something years, when Kerry Burtnick won the Brier in Halifax in '95, I believe I think they barely had sponsorship that year in terms of funds. In fact, the rumor I'd heard is they were down $10,000 before they went to that Brier. They hadn't really played that well that season. And, now a rink like the Gushu rink that hasn't won a Brier, they're set for the season in terms of their travel and costs. And I mean, they need the money. I mean, they need the sponsorship funding, because to try to travel all these events now is expensive. But that has really changed even in the last decade, right? Last 15 years, it's been phenomenal.
And the same with the women. But women find it tougher to get sponsored. And when they do get sponsorship, that is kind of killing. The Canadian Curling Association really sponsors 3 teams: Jennifer, Rachel Holman, and maybe Val Sweeting. But they sponsor, they send them to China, they send them to Europe, they send here spending money. And they do the same thing for the men. Mm-hmm. But the rest of the people underneath, the young ones coming up like Kelsey Rock, or Hannah Fallon Fleming, or Michelle Englot, this young kid, it's tough for them to go from Boston to Boston because the money, it costs you at least $7,000 to go to play in the cash. Mm-hmm. Airfare, hotel, entry fee, food, and it's expensive. So they don't have the money. So they can't go to all these to get enough points to get onto the World Curling Tour, who gets more points when they win a game. So it's tough. So I think they've got to look at doing a little bit more marketing and help the teams that are not in the top 10, but the next 10 down. The young kids who are coming up, they can't afford to spend $20,000 in curling a year. They can't do it. And the sponsors don't know them, and they won't get the money.
Yeah.
So, the same thing says for the men. It's getting too much.
Yeah, one of the challenges of that Own the Podium program is that it's so fixated on medals, right, and the funding. And I'd heard this as well. And so the challenge becomes, how do you generate gold medals? And so there's different opinions on how you do that. But what happened is, and particularly in the short term, everything that the CCA at the time was really doing was driving around, let's get our top teams and make them even better. But what that does is that funding then is going towards it, like you say, a very small select few, and it's not looking at the grassroots development of the next generation. And you're right, it is tough for that next step of teams. Now, the sponsorship as well is then also held by those same teams that are getting the same funding. So I agree with you. I mean, I don't know that there's a perfect answer. I think the development has to still occur, and I think there's two types of development. There's a development of trying to find out who the next Jennifer Jones is, who the next Kevin Cooey is. There's also the development of who are the next average curlers that are going to populate those clubs and actually keep the sport interested. Because one of the challenges that curling's often had is, golf, for every professional golfer, there's 10,000 people who will swing a club, right? Curling, for a lot of years, the ratio is quite different. And so we're starting to almost capture these fans, these television fans who don't actually play it. But that's limited, right? You can't do that forever.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you look in the stands at where these World Curling Tours events are played, last Sunday or Sunday before, the women were playing, and I bet you there wasn't 200 people in the stands. So I guess the television station is picking up the tab for running these things, but that's dangerous. That's dangerous.
No, it is a challenge, and I know that as long as the numbers are good and television's happy, but as a sponsor, so the way when I look at those sometimes, it is important to have a live event audience, because if I'm a potential sponsor and I'm watching an event and saying, well, why would I throw money at this? And I mean, I get it. People look at it and say, especially in the world of PVRs now, everybody wants live programming, so you can look at it and say, well, look at the numbers and look at, and curling is getting great numbers. But there also is a risk of saturation, and there's lots of events, lots of televised events. And I mean, the sponsor dollar is a challenge both for events themselves and for teams. We always want to think things are great, and then there's the opposite. There's the people who always want to say things are terrible. It's never really either extreme. Yeah.
The bad thing is that you look at some of the same people in the same event year after year after year after year. I mean, you got curlers now like
Glenn Howard. Glenn Howard. Glenn Howard's
53 years old.
Yeah.
53 years old. He's curling. Jeff Stoughton, 51 or 52, whatever it is, he was still curling. I mean, God, how long can you go on? What I don't understand is, can you imagine going away and spending 10 weeks a year with 3 guys? Get up in the morning, you share a room together, you go down to have breakfast, you go down and have lunch, you go practice, you go curling. I mean, God, that's unbelievable. When we curled, the guys went to, we had a drink or something together, and then they'd go off and away they'd go, but we were never glued to each other like they are now.
It is a case where teams that are able to get along and play well together, but that's not always the case.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
But that in this era, it's not always the case. Sometimes teams are very much formed around the almost as professional teams a little bit. That's starting. I mean, you could look at the way Kevin Martin started. Kevin Martin was consistently developing and tweaking his team to be the best team he could. It wasn't really about, I'm going to play with guys that I'm friendly with from my club or from the city I live in. It was, who are the best 3 guys that I can join with and win.
That's what's happening now, eh? And they don't care where they are, the women. Okay, give me a perfect. Rachel Holman. She just got married. She lives in Ontario. She married somebody, I think, in Edmonton or Calgary. I'm not sure. But she's in Edmonton, Calgary now. Anyway, the girl that played section for her, we lived in Edmonton or Calgary, and now she's in Ontario.
Yeah.
I mean, it's bizarre. That's bizarre.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, that's a great team. Rachel's a good team. Jennifer's a good. There's only actually 3 good women, and they're 2 of the rest of them is struggling. But they're the future. They're the future. I won't say anything against that. The future.
Well, it's interesting though. So you've seen some events this year where you've got Nicholas Adine, who's a phenomenal team and highly professional because they're even better funded than any of the Canadian teams.
Oh, sure. Same as Eve Muirhead.
It's a case now where Canada can't really claim dominance at this point in the sport. I think
No, that's right.
I mean, the men in particular have had a pretty dominant run, and they're still very strong, and I think the depth is still there for the time being. But, when you look a decade out, who knows, right?
Decade out, you'll see Koreans, China, Japan. They'll all be in there. They'll all be in.
Anyway, well, it's been great chatting with you, Don, and I hope, like I said, I hope we covered it all. If there's something you forgot and you want to you want to get back to me,
it's great. You're doing a good job.
Well,
okay, take care.
All right,
Kevin.
well, take care, Don. All the best. All right,
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So you were announcing that game as well, right? The 85 final. Rick Lang, I remember talking to about it. He said the game itself was rather boring for quite a while, and then that sort of exploded. Do you remember that moment then? And what it was like?
They were. Well, Pat Ryan was a hitting team for one thing, and it was boring. There wasn't much strategy involved. Hector wanted to junk it up, but Pat Ryan wouldn't let him do it. But the last two ends were exciting.
Yeah.
And that Pat Ryan never missed a draw in that thing to win a game, and he except for the last one he threw against Hector. Really.
Yeah. Well, and he talked about it on the first one I did. He talked. It was interesting. He talked about how that game really transformed the way he thought about curling. So they were a hitting team in '85, but after that year, he had his front end practice peeling. Like he said, no one really practiced peeling. You just sort of assume you could hit and you do it, and if you miss the odd one. Yeah. He said, you know what? We're never going to miss. And he really did he wanted to transform the way they played. Now, he also recognized it did transform the game itself and brought in free guard zone because nobody wanted to watch it, unfortunately.
No, that's right. That's exactly what they had. The Curling Association had a meeting, and I stood up and I said, and they were talking about the 2-1 game when Martin beat Jeff Stout, and I said, well, I tell you what, if you want to improve the game, get a little bit more movement in the ice. And they said, that's the point. Yeah, we know about that. And I said, well, do it.
Well, the issue is, they've got movement in the ice now, but you can still throw a hit without any movement. I mean, that's the challenge, right? Yeah. You're right. If
that's right.
You guys, you used to have to put 6 or 12 inches for a hit sometimes, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, just to get a
little more skill involved. But these guys run back are unbelievable. They're even looking at making that raise back triple kills. It's entertaining.